feel like I have lost a part of myself with his untimely death. He helped me shape into the adult and productive member of society I am today.
Because I think that I can be one of the many people that go out into the world and give back a tiny little bit of Vladimir Maletic's legacy. And I'm so proud and so grateful that I will have the opportunity to do that.
Well, I think we've all deeply felt the presence that Vlad had on all of us. And what I want to try and do in the closing portion of this is to really channel a little bit of what Vlad did so well, which was to really translate what happens in here into ways that we can understand this, and specifically talking about the experience of grief. You know, there's this beautiful word in Portuguese, saudade, which is often translated as sorrow or longing, but another way you can translate it is the presence of an absence, or conversely, the absence of a presence. And you will not be surprised to hear that there is a neural correlate to this. These researchers in Norway who ended up winning a Nobel Prize for this. By the way, there's a beautiful song by Cesare Evora by the same name, Saudade. But what they did is they trained rats. They put an electrode in the rat's brain so they could measure cell activity. And they stuck the rat in a environment with a blue Lego tower. And they did this over and over and over again. And what they noticed was every time the rat saw the blue Lego tower, certain cells would fire in the lateral entorhinal cortex, which is a very critical switch between the cortex and the hippocampus. It's where we make mental maps of the world. And when they took that blue tower out and they put the rat back in, and for 5 days afterwards, adjacent cells, which they called object trace cells, would fire. It took 5 days for the rat to redraw the map of the world with that object missing. And when we're in grief, one of the things that we experience is this upending of the maps that guide us through the world. Mary Frances O'Connor, who's a grief researcher at the University of Arizona, talks about the way, if you think about, imagine going to the bathroom in the middle of the night in your house when it's dark. You know where the furniture is, right? Even with your eyes closed, you have this mental map. Well, we have a similar experience for people. And when somebody dies, that map no longer maps to reality. And so this process of working through grief, it's different than what Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote about years ago, talking about really how people get used to the idea of a life-threatening illness. Grief is a different process, and grief starts with attachment. We generally don't grieve things that we're not attached to, and attachment, as we know, is registered through dopamine, it's registered through oxytocin, it's registered through endogenous opioids. And it is this relationship that we have with these attachment figures that helps to start to make these maps. And the maps are coded on 3 different dimensions. There's where the person is in space, where they are in time, and how close we are to them. And when we lose somebody, we go through this tremendous stress response. Our cortisol goes through the roof, our norepinephrine goes through the roof, we get heart rate variability. And in fact, people do die of broken hearts. And mortality, I have bad news for you guys. In the 3 years after the death of a partner, we are almost twice as likely to die. Now, women, on the other hand, their likelihood of death goes down when they lose a spouse. I'm not even gonna begin to opine on what that might mean. But really this idea that we are sympathetically activated to find the person that is no longer findable. And we get confused because now our map of the world that we carry inside our heads no longer maps to reality, and we find ourselves looking for that person when they're not there. And it's as if part of our brain can't quite catch up. And I think we've all had this experience, and the experience sometimes of rumination of thinking about the person over and over again. These are posterior default mode network activities, things like the posterior anterior cingulate, and yearning, that we actually have this sort of reward signal in our nucleus accumbens when we yearn for somebody. Now, some people have misinterpreted this, say, do we get addicted to grieving? No. Remember, the nucleus accumbens also codes for reward for things like water, for food, for connection. So we're literally yearning for that comfort of that person that is no longer there. I appreciate this quote from B.J. Miller, who's a palliative care doc. He said, suffering is the gap between what is and what we would like things to be. But over time, the process of moving through grief is really one of learning. And over time, we lose that reward signal to the experience of yearning, and that tends to quiet down. And because we have a new map, we make fewer prediction errors. But I'll tell you, friends, I still keep waiting to turn on the lights and see Vlad in the back of the room. I go in the faculty lounge and I'm like, why is he not here? Because my map has not quite caught up to this reality yet. And this process of moving through grief, it's not meant to be something we do on our own. In our highly individualistic culture that we have in the US, this idea that we're going to move through grief on our own it's a fallacy. We move through grief in community. That's why all the rituals around death require other people to be around. And it's through that process of being around other people that we borrow each other's nervous systems in very much the way an infant borrows the caregiver's nervous system to calm down. We co-regulate. We have mirror neurons that pick up each other's affect. And so this is why we need community in order to grieve. And the other thing about grief is that it's not linear. This idea that you're going to go through grief from point A to point B, it's all over the place, right? But what's happening is that as we go through this, it's almost as if we're like birds lifting up on a thermal of air, spiraling up with each pass, getting a broader perspective on that person's role in our life. And it gives us this sense of perspective, but we deepen that connection with each pass. And another thought here too is that, I don't know about you, but grief for me makes me more appreciative of what I have. It makes me appreciative of my friends up here, my colleagues, the natural world. I'm haunted by this line from Paul Bowles' novel. He said, and because we don't know when we'll die, we tend to think of life as an inexhaustible well, yet everything happens only a certain number of times, and a very small number, really. And, we know from neuroscience that when we engage with the outside world, we engage our salience network. When our salience network is turned on, our default mode network is turned off. And so, really this experience of getting back out into the world, watching the full moon rise, toasting our friend with, Vlad would want you to get the good wine, get the good wine. Vlad always got to choose the wine at our dinners, and I'm really glad he did, because he always chose well. But really, the legacy that we carry is within each of us, and I know many of you didn't maybe know Vlad personally, but you were impacted by him, as clearly he made an impact on many of us, and that we get to become really our teachers. So what comes next is we keep doing this. We grieve in community, we connect with each other, we laugh, which is exactly what Vlad would want, and we learn, which is really the best legacy I think he could have. So thank you.
Okay, so Andrew has just done a tremendous job with the